been some time, but it is a pleasure to welcome back my next guest, Andrii Telizhenko, the former Ukrainian diplomat, whistleblower, living in exile. You're looking well, Andrii. How are you?
Thank you. How are you? I'm trying to do my best from my end.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see you. It's been quite a while. We should say before we get underway, you and I initially met through our mutual friend Lee Stranahan, who people have heard, unfortunately, is not well. I saw Lee in the hospital in November, and his brother and son recently released a message that unfortunately, it doesn't look like Lee is going to be joining us in future broadcasts. We hope he's feeling all right, but he suffered a number of strokes, and he did a lot of great work with you, Andrii. You initially came to prominence when you blew the whistle. You brought a lot of information from your job working in the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, D.C. You had firsthand experience. You were on the ground in Maidan Square when the revolution broke out. And the other day I saw you, I guess, on a podcast saying that you're seeing signs that what's happening in Minneapolis and around the United States are reminiscent. These things are reminding you of exactly what was happening in your home country of Ukraine before this war broke out. Tell us what you've been seeing and what you think.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. It's been a while that we didn't talk live on broadcast, and yeah, Lee was the one who brought me the spotlight after the Political article, which they tried to cut me off, and Lee was the one who basically told the story in such depth that he actually investigated this. And I'm praying from my dear friend and my brother. I do hope to see him hopefully one day, and when my sanctions are all lifted, that I can come and travel to be with him and shake his hand, because he is a true also professional in his sphere. You and him and are both the guys that actually dig into things and actually do the real work, the real journalistic work. And I'm proud to have you and have Lee as a friend. And uh, I reached out to his brother and his son. They were collecting information about these investigations and videos and interviews. So I did send some stuff that we had on record from my end. Hopefully that'd be usable. Maybe people who have anything from their end, they can also add on to Lee's account or to message Lee's account, personal messages, and they can add videos or photos of him. So
Yeah.
hopefully, praying for our friend and get, getting back to what Lee investigated, the Maidan, the coup, and what happened in Ukraine and the United States. It's happening today. It's just a tragedy from what I'm seeing, that the people that are doing all these things these things in other countries abroad of the United States are actually doing this against their own citizens. It's one thing that you're doing this against people you don't care about, Ukrainians, uh, Nicaraguans, other people around the globe, whatever. But here are people within the United States that are basically you're undermining your own governments, your law enforcement, your society, trying to build up a revolution because you don't like the people who run the country today. And this is what's happening in America: a revolution, a color revolution. By the book that they did in Ukraine, they did two of them in Ukraine. One in 2004 during the so-called Orange Revolution, when they had the third round of elections. They had the same thing in the elections as the United States did in 2020. Uh, Voting, House votes, mail-in ballots, which the State Department actually made a list of all those problems during elections. And the same thing happened in 2020 elections in the United States. Basically, they stole them. And they had a third round of elections, which is not even in the constitution of Ukraine, but they pushed it. The West pushed it, the State Department did, and they put their own puppet, the President Yushchenko, who then basically started and to destroy the Ukraine from within. And then we saw the second Maidan, the coup with blood already, more aggressive, with cocktail Molotovs, burning of the tires in front of the police, basically storming the buildings around Kyiv, government buildings, shops, just to take and loot and basically put them as use them as barricades against the
Andrei, let me
police. So this
pause you
is
1 second. You just said something very important that Viktor Yushchenko was put in there basically, in your estimation, and I agree, through cheating in the election, and that he was destroying Ukraine from within. How did he do that? Because you're making a lot of important analogies, and it makes me think that this is what they did with Joe Biden. And Biden, of course, opened the borders and increased inflation to insane amounts. So how did Viktor Yushchenko destroy Ukraine from within?
look, Ukraine was like it was always part of Russia for more than 350 years before this. Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, long history. Basically, uh, it's Russian territory. That's what it's called historically. Ruskiye Russians. That's what the hetmans called it. Like from I don't want to go into history right now, but basically, Ukraine got its independence in 1991, and it was being more or less neutral in between NATO, Europe, going back and forth. It gave away its nuclear arsenal, which it didn't control, but they cried for it right now. Thank God maybe Ukraine doesn't have it because it would be a total disaster if Ukraine had any nuclear missiles or nuclear elements. So then they come in, they have different presidents in Ukraine, Kuchma, and then they have this. Elections in 2004, where they bring in a candidate, which is a former head of the National Bank, who has a wife. Uh, uh, Yushchenko has a wife she's Ukrainian American, but basically grew up and brought up in Chicago, United States. Katerina Chumachenko, that's her basically original name, and Katerina Yushchenko, and she's from working for the CIA, and she basically becomes his right hand man, his person, and they push him as one of the leading candidates for the opposition in Ukraine. And after placing him and after pushing him into these elections, with third round where he allegedly won, they basically start to dismantle the government from within, putting in former heads of the Secret Service of Ukraine, which have connections with the United States or loyal to America. They basically start installing CIA and FBI elements, people within the Security Service of Ukraine and National Intelligence of Ukraine, basically starting to dismantle the system from within, step by step, but it's a beginning of what Ukraine never saw before, and it's being put under the sauce of pro-Westernization, pro-Europe, pro-NATO, moving Ukraine into that direction. Even though the society was not ready at that time, the population in 2004 did not want to join NATO. They had 34% support of NATO, and that was the official numbers. The real numbers were much less. So Yushchenko starts pushing these pro-Western elements and within the government, and people actually with foreign adversaries and foreign passports working directly. His advisors had U.S. passports, like people like Roman Zvaric. There were, as an example, who held an American passport. He was proud of it, and he worked with national security clearances, etc. So this is the first step of basically dissolving and destroying Ukraine from within, but it didn't work because Ukraine was very still not pro-Russian, but Russia's close. Historically, Ukraine had very close ties to Russia. It was no problem that we had pro-Russian parties, or pro-Belarusian parties, which wanted to be friends with Russia and Belarus and not move westward because they understood Ukraine is going to lose everything. But these people sold off Ukraine. They had a lot of corruption scandals. They started fighting Russia for the gas, not paying for the gas, trying to show that Russia is the boogeyman, and building in a foreign enemy from within Ukraine with a support of the United States. At one point, Bush Jr. wanted to get Ukraine to join NATO. He basically agreed upon that. That was in 2008. That's when the war in Georgia starts, also with the help of pro-Western allies. The president of Georgia, Saakashvili, was basically a godson, a godfather to one of the children of Yushchenko. So they're basically relatives, and they're all coordinated by the West and the IRI, International Republican Institute, NDI, USAID. All those organizations are there in Ukraine. They start blooming. The Soros organizations get involved directly. And Yushchenko supports Saakashvili in this war against his own people in Georgia, saying basically, we're going to give you weapons. And people who actually sent weapons to Georgia under Yushchenko's government fled and now reside in London under British citizenships, and they have full support of the West. So this is what Ukraine had become under Yushchenko, a starting, moving little pace of destruction of a system, like a Soviet system, which was strong. It wasn't the best system that could be workable, but it was actually a strong system that was, the bureaucracy itself was built in to hold the 90s, which were a terrible economical situation for post-Soviet countries like Russia, Ukraine, total disaster. People were living in $20 a month, and that was huge money in Ukraine. If we had a salary of $20 and $50 a month, that'd be big chunk of cash. But people lived through that. People had some dignity and people had some patriotism. That was totally destroyed under Yushchenko. That was starting to sort of only what pro-Western views were eligible. History starting to be rewritten that Ukrainians were the heart of forming Russia, that only if it wasn't Ukrainians, there was no Europe today. That's basically false narratives. The pro-Bandera, pro-Nazi regime were glorified. Yushchenko gave the one of the or the son or not the son but I think the grandson of Bandera, the basically the hero of Ukraine star. So basically, he organized and glorified that on an official level, made it okay in Ukraine to think that these neo-Nazi groups are patriots. So step by step, they started to destroy the system from within and rewrite history. And as I said, and then came Viktor Yanukovych. People voted for him with a majority. They didn't want this pro-Western move, and Yanukovych came to power after economical crisis and actually held the economy pretty strong and then didn't want to go into Europe as fast as possible, said glorifying Bandera is bad, and we want to basically have a good relationship with Russia, not glorifying any Nazis in Ukraine. And let's get back to our history that actually Ukraine lost almost 15 million people during World War II fighting the Nazism, and let's get back our history. So he was ousted. Then in 2013-14, when the Maidan started the coup against a president that was supported by the United States, Yanukovych met with Obama. He had U.S. government representatives on his inauguration, so he was officially supported and shown that the United States support these elections. And then basically, what happened is how Yanukovych also came to power. It was a struggle between Yushchenko and other political figures like Tymoshenko to come to power, and Yushchenko's people, Yushchenko's surrounding, sold out so that Tymoshenko would not come to power and basically let uh, Yanukovych become president. And like that's a separate story. If I go into that, that's another hour of talk. So this is what Ukraine started to become. There was starting a lot of problems. People living okay. People had the good economy, even though the economic crisis hit hard. But it was an okay Ukraine because it did not move directly towards the West. Ukraine still was not used because there were so many elements within the country did not let it sell out as fast as the West wanted. So the West thought, okay, we had one revolution in Ukraine, one coup, so let's do another one, but more aggressive one because we need blood. And it was being talked about since 2005 that Ukraine needs another revolution with blood, and then things would change much faster. Ukraine will move away from Russia much faster and move towards the West. So that's what they were starting to plan. And these talks started to happen since 2005.
When
And
you say these talks, where were those talks happening? Was it
on
on
the government,
television?
on the government level, between people, between politicians, I was still like 15 years old, 16 years old, but I was with my parents in the embassy, meeting other people, and I remember those talks between members of parliament who were just sitting in our house and talk and say, "Oh, we need blood next time. There's going to be a coup or something happen in Maidan. We need
Wow.
with blood because that's how it's going to make sense. Because now Ukraine is still too close to Russia. Ukraine is making deals with Russia. Ukrainian politicians don't want to move away from Russia, and we need to spill Ukrainian blood so people will start be more hatred
Wasn't that
towards."
shocking, though, for you to hear that? I mean, even at 15, not to get too personal, but were you born, Andre, before perestroika or after?
I was born in 1990,
So right at the
35.
time, you were a little baby.
Yeah, my basic birth certificate. I have a Soviet Union birth certificate. So with the
But really no
with all the
clear
mark.
recollection of the
No,
Soviet
I
Union.
don't. I didn't remember. I remember the '90s pretty well, but the
Rough
'90s for me
period.
showed, yeah, a very rough period. Even though I grew up in Canada partially during that time, but still, I remember the people, the Soviet, uh, not the communists, but the Soviet education, the Soviet basically bureaucracy, the Soviet approach of life. People had nothing. They did not. They were not greedy. Regular people were living. Like I said, my parents would pick up some potatoes. I would buy one banana a month. That's what they could afford for me in the '90s. That's the reality. But still, we would come back with all those groceries. My dad would get paid with groceries, with potatoes and fish off on his job. Sometimes he didn't get money as salary. So, but we would come back home, and our other neighbors would get paid the same way, and we would be happy. We'd get together, have dinner, like neighbors living on both sides within the building, and then people from other floors would come down, and it was actually a bad time for the country, but people were living still with those approaches of the Soviet times, with no greed, that everybody is equal, that everything should be better, that we are strong together, we have a strong history. Ukraine today has some future because we basically were also the ones who destroyed Nazism in Europe. Our fathers and grandfathers fought. We had a very rich history going back. So people had something inside them that moved them forward, even though they had nothing at that time even to eat. So yeah, there was banditism and other stuff happening on the streets, and mafia growing fast. But still, even the police officers working on a wage of $20 and $30 a month, fighting the organized crime, which was draining millions from the government with the support of the West, because the oligarchs in Russia and Ukraine were formed by the West. Western advisors who came to Ukraine basically helped uh, start the selling of the factories and from the government and to private sector, and the private sector basically was advised by Western American and British advisors and European advisors, and that's how the oligarchy got formed. So it was the West who came in and formed that oligarchy. Then they started to fight against it at one point because it became too independent. So I said, the people, I did not see the Soviet Union, but I saw what the Soviet Union brought after when there was total chaos and destruction, but people still stood together, even though that fact. So that what it is, I understood it only now, recently, about all what happened, because a lot of stuff were I did not understand during that period of time, because as I said, I grew up in the West at one point. I came back to Ukraine in 2010, and I started to see the way the world, that we need to move to the West, something better for Ukraine, a better future. That's what I was taught uh, by growing up, so living in the West, and we thought that some future would bring us European future, NATO future would bring best for Ukraine. So that's why I was part of the Orange Revolution. I was part basically directly during the coup in Maidan of 2014. I was a advisor to a member of parliament during that period of time. And then I was working with G7 ambassadors and embassies in Ukraine in 2011 and 2010, 2012, and
Let me ask you
working
one
with
more
the
quick
mission.
question about this Orange Revolution, because I was still married to a Ukrainian woman at this time, and I remember her brother and her, some of her direct immediate family lived in Ukraine. I heard about this Orange Revolution, and some sort of this word TAK, TAK, had something to
Yeah,
do with this, didn't it?
it means yes.
Yeah, right. Because her brother gave me a T-shirt that was the Orange Revolution and it said "TAC" on it, and Tatiana told me to wear it. And I remember I was very reluctant to get involved in some kind of political movement that I knew nothing. There it is. that I knew nothing
Yeah.
about. I didn't know I didn't want to wear a political slogan around New York City in a language I didn't understand about something that I totally didn't understand. But it just, even at the time, and I didn't know nearly as much about politics or psychological aberrations as I do now. It just struck me that this thing was promoted almost like a product on a television commercial, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was basically a trademark for
Right.
anybody who would wear something orange, an orange T-shirt, an orange stripe on their backpack, ribbon, or something that basically promoted showed that you are supporting the revolution in Ukraine and against the government, and you have to basically. But it was, as I said, peaceful. That's why uh, people were a lot of people in politics who wanted to move much more westward and sell out to the West. It didn't like because it didn't change a lot. Ukraine was still Ukraine. Ukraine was still moving forward the way it was moving in between the West and Russia, which was gaining. Ukraine was gaining a lot, being in the middle, at the bridge between the West and East. That was the Ukraine's basically monetization. It didn't have to be in NATO. It didn't have to be in the EU even. It didn't have to be anywhere. Its own sovereign, independent country in the middle between these two uh, big countries like unions like the European Union, Russia, and China. The route that goes to China, the economical route went through Ukraine during that period of time. Now it goes to Belarus. So
Hmm.
Ukraine had a lot of potential to gain from the Silk Route to China went through Ukraine. That was the project. And then now, because of what Ukraine has destroyed, after all these years of destroying the country, it had so much wealth and prosperity that has nothing today because of the bad decisions even I made, which I will carry for the rest of my life. That I was part of
What do
it
you
because
mean? Well, but you didn't know. You were deceived, basically. I mean, certainly now,
yeah, but I will.
and people who are in the know realize that this drive to get into NATO would only agitate Russia and create the problems that Ukraine is facing now.
But still, I will, as I said, I do know, and I stood up against it when I was in the government in Ukraine. Afterwards, and I'm still fighting it, and I'm still going to fight it for Ukraine to be sovereign and independent of what's left of Ukraine. And but I was part of it. I still carry and will carry that burden because uh, that was my choice. I did not know what was I was into going into because I was like around 20 something years old, 21, 22 when it all started, and I thought I was doing something best for Ukraine because I said during that period of time, this was 2011 and 2010. I came back from the States, didn't want to stay in the West. I want to come back to Ukraine, do something good for Ukraine, and I thought I was doing something good. I joined the political party with Timoshenko, was an advisor to a member of parliament, helping work with the foreign embassies at that period of time. And I was then asked basically to work during the coup and during the Maidan, work as an unofficial coordinator with the G7 embassies. Plus, I had a good relationship with the U.S. Embassy, Ambassador Pyatt, and uh, the political officers and military officers of the U.S. Embassy at that time in Kyiv. So I was basically coordinating all that work and plus helping with coordinating the security of U.S. senators when they came to Ukraine, Senator McCain and Senator Chris Murphy, which then Chris Murphy was happy that I was sanctioned, even though I was responsible for his security at one point when he was in Kiev. And so that was, I saw a lot of stuff during that period of time. It's like the Orange Revolution I saw only as a child and something from outside and only talks that were going on that we have to be more independent, move westward, and that kind of stuff. But during my down in 2014, I was always against aggressiveness, even though I was actually saving a lot of police officers. I had a story before I go into deep into the coup in 2014 that there was head of the police, one of the Kyiv city police departments, that was captured by the activists on Maidan. They wanted to bring him on the stage and basically beat him up on the stage and that kind of stuff and show that, oh, we have the head, one of the heads of the Kyiv police, and I saved him. I said, look, I'm going to bring him on my own, let him go, and then I basically brought him back to to his police department because they would have killed him
Yeah, they would have killed him. I was
or
going to
tor-
say, it seems like that kind
or
of
tortured
crowd
him.
mentality. The guy gets up there. What's to stop them from just killing him? It was really a difficult and, I mean, Ukraine is still in a difficult period. So when you see what's going on with people agitating ICE agents and then the ICE agent shoots somebody, and it seems to have calmed down a little bit in the past week or so, but what are the parallels that you're seeing? Because obviously Ukraine was in a much different position in the geopolitical world than the United States is. So the changes aren't going to look exactly the same. But I was really intrigued when you said this destruction from within. That sounds like what Joe Biden was doing, what people like Tim Walz are doing, Ilhan Omar. They're stealing money for themselves. They're selling out the principles of the Constitution. What else do you see happening that causes concern?
What I saw in America, it started happening because I was studying in Washington D.C. I was during that period of time, 2007 elections. During the Obama administration, that's when this thing started to basically undermining total principles of of normal America. The changes in the bureaucratic level, deep state, pushing on all levels the same as Yushchenko started to do, and then under Poroshenko in Ukraine, pushing different people on different levels that were basically loyal not to the country, not to a political idea, but loyal to a leader or loyal to a cause to have only their political view and have them work in different levels of the government. In Ukraine was people working for the United States and the British and the European intelligence. In the United States, were people working for big corporations, industrial complexes, Obama himself, and his ideas, and basically being loyal. And so it started in the United States in 2007 when Obama became president, his first term, and then the second term. So it was basically destruction from within. That's why it's so troublesome for Trump today coming to power, bringing all these changes because the system itself is rotten. And what they did in the United States to Ukraine when they wanted to change the system after the coup in 2014, fire everybody. They told us the ambassador of the United States would come into the prosecutor's office when I was advisor to the prosecutor general. You should fire 12,000 prosecutors within a month.
What?
They're all corrupt. And then the other ones that are left, the other like 12,000, retest them. And the other ones who don't pass the test, fire them also. And
How
then
many
hire people just
prosecutors did they have?
had overall around like 40, 50,000 people overall working throughout Ukraine. I don't remember the exact number, but it was around that. That
But
was
still,
still
12 is a lot.
that's a burden because then the other prosecutors, not every prosecutor carried and worked with cases. Some people just worked within the system, and
Right.
then there were other prosecutors who worked on cases. And basically, after firing 12,000, and Ukraine did have to fire them, and then they would have changes. So the the system right now in the United States, I think what needs to be done, cleaning from bottom to up, because and from bottom from top to bottom also at the same time, because otherwise you'll have a bureaucracy which is going to destroy the country from within. That's what they're doing in democratic states like California, like Oregon, like Minnesota, New York State right now also has a lot of questions what's going to happen to it. So th- these problems are going to grow in the United States in a little bit different way than in Ukraine, but with basically the system is gonna go against the government, and they're gonna go basically by destroying the law enforcement. How they're gonna destroy the law enforcement? They're gonna say they're too aggressive. The law enforcement is inactive. We have to basically clean them up. We have to fire them. We have to take away their possibilities, political possibilities, and law enforcement possibilities, so they can come in and do their job. That's what they did with Ukraine prosecutors when they come in. They took away that oversight law, which Ukraine prosecutors did. They could oversight the police, oversight the other law enforcements, and that's how the system worked. That's what they're doing in the United States. They're taking away the power from the law enforcement around different democratic states. So they will be inactive. If something happened like this, like Antifa, the terrorist group, or other anti-ICE groups that are going right now. They're going to say, oh, the police, the law enforcement is aggressive. So you're going to have a very inactive layer of law enforcement at the bottom. So when the federal forces come in, or when they're going to act, the people are not going to be loyal to the federal forces. Also, they're going to basically they're going to come in too late, or they're going to be aggressive towards them and protest against them directly because they're going to do their job, and it's going to start forming chaos and going to show, oh, somebody in Washington, there's a dictator, a king. That's what they did in Russia against the king protest. Against that's what they did in Washington D.C. against Trump, the king,
Yeah,
and
no
protest.
kings.
They're going to push That's the same narrative they did in Russia. No kings, no tsar. So it's the same
Right,
playbook. The
right.
same thing in Ukraine. They did put in jail the leader of the country. We have to go against him because his law enforcement is too aggressive towards us. So it's a buildup towards you're destroying the system that is going to protect the government and everybody, all other citizens who voted for that government, and push 100,000 people. You don't need a lot. You have like 1% of idiots. Sorry for
You're right.
living in a country, right? 1% out of 350 million. That's a lot. Out of that 1%, 100,000 are going to go very aggressive. Like that's 3.5 million. So out of that 3.5 million, you get 100,000 people that are very crazy, and
Yeah.
you use them and go and push them to a point that they're going to go and basically obey what is going to be driven to them by the local political agenda, local businesses that are involved in this because they're supported by the government or getting grants from the government at one point, and they have to obey what the government's going to give them. So it's going to be directly not from the Democratic Party. It's going to be widespread as a spider web, where from local businesses, local organizations, local uh, nonprofit organizations, especially even the different groups that are not even involved in politics are going to be involved at one point, and you're going to be seeing their flags or their people be pushed and to go against the government in protest. It's going to start from a city. That's what it did in Ukraine at one point. They before the coup 2014, they had a little revolution, little coup in a city called Kherson, where they had a girl was raped and alleged by the police, and then some government official paid for that rape or something. They had that story in the news, and they had the whole city basically stood up and started to shake the city like Kherson, which is a couple 100,000 people, to change the government. So they did it from a little city, a small area, and then they moved it up towards the capital. That's what it's going to happen in the United States. That's what I'm seeing happening in the United States by destroying law enforcement, by destroying federal agents, by making them look like Nazis. That's what they're saying, and that's what the news, the big media is talking about. Oh,
Yeah,
these
see,
law
that's
enforcement are
important. Let's
Nazis.
stop on that for a
That's what they
second
did in
because,
Ukraine. They did that in
right,
Ukraine, the same thing. They said law
that's
enforcement
very,
are Nazis.
very interesting to me that you're saying that because it can start from just a seed of a small thing, a news story in a small town that goes viral essentially. And, you've spoken in the past about, or perhaps it was me who brought it up, that Nina Jankowicz was very involved in disseminating some kind of information in Ukraine. Here she is. She was doing Russian language, and I think she might even speak Ukrainian. She definitely speaks Russian, but she was heavily promoted as some kind of expert, seemed to be involved in propaganda, in my opinion. This is a very dangerous person, as far as I can tell, and she's involved in these different groups that are trying to, set the narrative here in the United States as well.
Of course, that's how they work. They pay a lot of money to look into the sociological picture of how the country looks, starting locally and in different regions, which are weaker, which are not weaker, where they have allies within the government that can support them, where they have allies. They did this in Ukraine, where they have people who sold out to their corporations or to their countries, like the United States, or in the United States, an example, who sold out to their corporation or to one of their group PACs, and they're going to move these people through politicians into local groups because they do a lot of research on this, which is done right now, I think, by the deep state using the U.S. intelligence. Uh, the FBI, even the CIA, may be involved in this on U.S. soil against the will of the President of the United States, even behind his back and behind the back of the leaders like Kash Patel and Director Sayrakov, they may not even know that this is happening because this is how the bureaucratic system is so corrupt from within that they might have these people just working for outside groups, basically destroying their country and working against their country to build up an intelligence operation that is going to go at one point, as it start locally. They're doing this for some reason. We have to understand. They're
Yeah.
doing this for a reason to destroy the MAGA movement, the Republican movement that was not obeying the corporate agenda or military-industrial complex agenda or the pro-Israeli agenda with the war, anything like that. They're going to build up, use that, and destroy those politicians, and then destroy the government itself, the president. Not destroy it, but overthrow it and change the figures around for the people that are going to be more loyal or be obedient like Joe Biden, who was
Yeah.
didn't not even know what it was, where he was or what he was doing. Basically, Obama was
You're right.
controlling the picture on the side. So this is what they need. The same thing with Zelensky. They brought it to Ukraine. A person that is controllable, doesn't know where he is, what he's doing, what his politics is at all,
Right.
and they need those kind of people, and they need those people around the country. I remember in Ukraine when I was pro uh, American, as they thought I was. I like America. I love America. I grew up there. I have nothing against the United States. The people in America, they're great. The food is great. The people are great. Everything. I love it. But they basically thought I was their own because they can have people like me be used within the system to push the narrative, push the web of people who are going to be controlled from the outside. And basically, they promised me high government positions if I continue to be loyal to them. And this is how it works. And they're doing the same thing in US soil, unfortunately, which is illegal, I think, by all U.S. standards and by laws. It's you're, you're you're basically trading your country for corporate ideas or money or just whatever you think you are doing right. You're not doing it right. You have to think
Yeah.
what is going to happen, what are the consequences, what's going to happen to the country.
Let's talk
I
about
stood up against Obama in 2007 because I understood that he's going to destroy the country because the ideas that he was bringing to the table were not pro-American. If you're going to have
But
a
now
ship like the
they've
United
turned
States,
on you, Andre, right? Let's talk about this
yeah,
for a second because when you stood up to that, they destroyed you and they're continuing to. You mentioned Kash Patel a moment ago, but it doesn't seem to me like they've done anything to help you. When you just search your name in Google, the first thing that comes up is the sanctions list, and all of these things talk about the viewpoints of your detractors, Ukraine hoax. Basically, they all say that you're sanctioned, and your detractors say that you're sending disinformation and whatever. Obviously, Rudy Giuliani has been totally hammered in a legal sense. Has anything happened to improve your situation under this second Trump administration?
nothing as of what I know. I'm still under sanctions, which were imposed
When will this
by
end?
Pompeo and Mnuchin. I don't know. This is for a lifetime until you die.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then even though when you die, you have to still appeal that you're dead. Somebody has to prove that you're dead. They take you off the list. So
Wow.
I was offered to get in contact with a couple of lawyers. They did look, OFAC lawyers did look into my case. They said there's no evidence at all. It's an empty case. I knew, but to hire a lawyer, an
It's
OFAC
so much
lawyer,
money.
first of all, I have to pay on my own. It's $500,000 overall, and $100,000 up signing. So I don't have that kind of money. I'm living on social welfare. My wife basically is working, and so that's for me. It's impossible to do that. And the people who I
They've ruined
trusted
you. They've destroyed you
to help me,
financially.
yeah, I have nothing. I cannot open. It's not just because I'm on sanctions. I want to be off sanctions because I want to travel to America. Sanctions when they impose on you, it's you cannot open up a bank account in the Western world, basically, or any bank around the globe who's dealing with U.S. dollars officially. You cannot if you don't open up a bank account, you can't get a job or not even being a janitor because you need a bank account in the West to get paid and pay taxes. So that's already a big problem. If you want to work for a foreign company, nobody's going to hire you because foreign companies are going to not hire people who are sanctioned because it's a high risk. So like life is totally destroyed, not because I cannot travel. Like it's because I cannot live and survive, and I'm 35 years old now. I'm going to be 36. Like I'm going to retire at this age, and my wife is going to just do her job, and I'm going to be living this the way where I am. But I'm still going to continue fighting. I'm still talking about things on air. I'm going on different TV channels. Who gives me the platform? I'm not getting paid for this, even though I could. But I don't want to, not just because I have some pride, but because if I start getting paid for what I talk, I won't be able to talk it with open heart and be truthful to the people because it's going to be a thing talking on a narrative. I already was involved in kind of stuff during the coup in 2014, which I promised I will never be involved in this situation ever again. So I'm talking for free in every TV channel that are Azerbaijani TV, Russian TV, Ukrainian podcasters who are abroad, who are not affiliated with the regime in Kyiv, United States television, One American News Network with you here, Jason. So any platform, I'm going to continue to talk until whatever the day comes. A lot of health problems, but as I said, sanctions they do destroy you. You cannot survive in the Western world. I went to the West because I thought maybe at one point with the new Trump administration things might change and I'm going to get my case will get re-looked into because everybody knows people who have worked with me that those sanctions are false, that I'm not no Russian agent. Everything I testified to or talked about publicly on U.S. media and with you and with Lee, I testified under oath to the Federal Election Commission. I testified and gave information to the United States Senate, Senator Johnson, Senator Grassley, which used my information in their Senate report. 87 pages out of that report, 27 pages are my emails and mentions of me that I'm not a Russian agent. MSU Senate official report. Yes, the Democrats have their own report saying that I'm Senator Wyden saying that I'm a Russian agent, and they were happy that I was sanctioned. Chris Murphy was happy that I was sanctioned. Blumenthal even wrote a letter on his page that I was happy that I was sanctioned. So U.S. senators were happy that I was sanctioned. Romney was happy that I was sanctioned. So there was a lot of people who actually, from U.S. senators, who had things. This is the committee report from the Democratic Party. But there's another report by the Republican Party, which is hard to find online. It's Hunter Biden corruption, it's called, and it's by Senator Johnson, Senator Grassley. That's the original report that basically uh, this is the Democratic report, which it's easy to find that one, but the real one, the original one, it's hard to find. So basically, they were all happy that I was sanctioned to shut me up, so I won't testify anymore. So I cannot talk about this anymore. And as I said, U.S. senators had nothing else to do but to write letters praising and being happy that a Ukrainian, some small guy from, as they said, a nobody, was basically sanctioned by the United States government. So this is the reality we live in today. People are
It's
afraid to
unbelievable.
who speak the truth. I have nothing against President Trump. I understand what's happening in there right now. I'm still talking to some people and understand the system is so rotten from within, uh, starting from the Obama administration, that this is going to be very hard for Trump and his team to do something even to make peace with Russia, because so much people are going to be backstabbing and doing their own thing. They're going to try to overthrow the president of the United States, I think, not no, not during the midterms, but after the midterms, after they actually gain power within Congress and Senate, to start moving impeachment hoaxes again. And they're going to start pushing revolution and to destroy the whole MAGA movement to show that they are the bad guys in the situation. I think this is what the book is for the United States. These people are not afraid to have a civil war in their country because they don't care. They
Seems like
don't
they
care.
want that, right? I mean, you
Yes,
said
because
you
they
heard
don't.
people calling for blood. It's almost like January 6th, the Orange Revolution in the United States, basically, that's in the past. I mean, what you're saying, it's very ominous because it seems to indicate that the true danger has yet to really come.
Yes, unfortunately, this is just the beginning of something disastrous. That and these people don't care about the United States. These people don't care about the country they live in because they have wealth abroad. They have the same thing as in Ukrainian. Zelensky doesn't care about Ukraine. He has wealth abroad. The same thing with these guys. They think they can control it. They have now they moved their deep state base to London, where our friend Lee talked about Bill Browder. He's the new Soros. So basically, these guys are coordinating with him. Nobody's talking about Brown, no? But he's coordinating all Brennan, Obama. They're meeting with him in London. They're trying to undermine and basically build the new revolution in America today by destroying every law enforcement they can within around with the democratic states, and then they're going to use the DC with the same idea. Trump did a great thing by basically pushing the National Guard in Washington D.C. That's just basically giving him the opportunity to do things. But there needs to be more done within this. Special groups have to be formed within the FBI who are going to be loyal to Kash Patel and to the President of the United States, actually investigating what is happening on the ground in America. Is there something happening behind the backs of the U.S. government by forces from outside the United States, basically, and or forces within the United States using politicians, governors, members of Congress and Senate to go against an acting president and acting administration who people voted for. That is the same thing what happened in Ukraine. People voted for Yanukovych, but they went after him. They didn't care. So the same thing they're going to do. If they did what they did in 2020, they didn't care that these elections, and the world saw what the United States did. The fraud elections of 2020, what was happening around the United States with the mail-in votes, stacks. So I did a lot of elections during my last 15 years. So I see when there's a fraud election happening. And what the United States did to itself in 2020, they didn't care about what the world is going to think, even though it made the United States weaker. And they did that anyway. And they're going to do it even more aggressively because now, when Trump came to power second term, he started doing things more actively. They're going to go against him as much as possible so nobody even would think to be a new Trump or even have the possibility to be a new Trump. I think Trump has a lot of enemies in his close circle right now working against him, saying that they're his friends and they're his people that he trusts. I don't want to name names, but I think they're very close advisors of a high level that are right now beside him that he should not trust. And they're going to work against him because they're working for their term
Yeah.
as the new president of the United States and not the person who Trump thinks they are.
So, Andrii, what do you see happening next in Ukraine? Man, we hear a lot of talk about, Russia-Ukraine talks with Trump and, peace talks, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere. What's your assessment? What's next?
Well, the United States is using, as I said, people around Trump. There are people I don't trust from what I see. I may be wrong, but usually when I have a hunch or an analytical understanding of the situation, even being far away, I understand what is happening. And their problem is they're not wanting to have peace in Ukraine. They're pushing the idea of having peace in Ukraine as further as possible. First of all, to use Ukraine to gain what they need to gain from Russia in the international level of the transforming the world for basically a bipolar political agenda and trade off Venezuela, trade off the Middle East, trade off Latin America, basically to build the Pan Americana world. Because and they understand how Ukraine is in a big interest to Russia to have in its back door, not to have NATO. And they're going to use that. And plus, they would want peace. They would have, as soon as they would get what they gained, and they think the United States already got a lot. They got Venezuela. I think Russia's supporting them of the United States buying Greenland and taking Greenland, whatever's going to happen. And even Canada, they don't care. But the United States wants more. The United States wants to use Ukraine in the situation. They could have did like this in 24 hours, snapped their finger. Trump said an executive order getting the U.S. intel groups out of Ukraine. The CIA, more than 20 bases of CIA are in Ukraine today, advising Zelensky on how to fight the war with Russia. Get them out of Ukraine. Get the FBI out of Ukraine. Get the NSA out of Ukraine. The military intelligence. Leave the embassy, diplomatic corps, official representatives of the United States, and then there will be peace within, I think, a couple of weeks. This war would start. There'd be stopping of killings of people within 24 hours. But this is what Trump could have done and should do, and leave Ukraine alone. And I believe that's the case because the United States does not know and doesn't want to do anything good in Ukraine. They want to just use the
Why
country
do you think
because
Trump hasn't done it?
the people around him are advising him in not professional manner in a way to bring peace to the country. They're advising that he can bend over or he can break Russia and to doing more favors for the United States for Ukraine. There's always this red line point where you cannot move, we cannot ask more from a country like Russia, which is the largest nuclear country in the world, and pretty holding up economy still, even though the sanctions. And the United States, Russia knows that the United States has problems. Uh, Basically, the 39, almost $39 trillion of debt, and half of the gold reserve is missing. And so
Or more.
those are the, or more, yes, then that's the reality. And Russia knows that, and not only Russia, and they knowing that they still are going, basically trying to negotiate with the United States because they understand that the future is to cooperate with and make money with America, not just be at war all the time. That doesn't make any sense. We're living in the 21st century. This is not the Cold War era. This is nobody wants to fight and have nuclear weapons fly over the Atlantic or the Pacific and on one another. People just want to make money. This is the age of making profits for not just for your country but also for yourselves. And there's always a red line that Russia's not going to cross, and America's pushing it, trying to get more and more and more, even though I think already more was given to the United States. And I mean, with Venezuela, with agreeing on Greenland, even Putin speaking on a speech a week ago said that Trump offered, I think, 700 or $800 billion for Greenland. And Putin said the rough amount for Greenland is around $300 million. That's the equivalent of what half more than what Russia, what the United States paid for Alaska, which Alaska's territory is half less than Greenland. So this is basically with today's money, that's $400 million. He
Oh,
actually gave
because
him
he's saying the
a
dollar is
better
so
deal.
devalued?
Yeah, because Greenland, I think, was bought for $7 million at that time in the 19th century, and then now the dollar is the value of it. It's around a bit more, like around 24. Right now, the cost for 30 million would be. So basically, the value for Greenland is $400 million in today's dollars equivalent, not $700 billion what Trump actually wanted to pay for. So Russia's playing along with Trump's ideas. They're actually trying to help him, and they're America is still trying to push, and not America, not Trump, I think, but the deep state is trying to push the narrative to fight Russia and continue this war, to just use Ukraine because Zelensky's ready to be used more and more, even though his popularity is gone. There's no support of Zelensky at all. People are freezing. They understand because he is responsible for those reasons, not the Russian military, but he is. He should have stopped this. He should have ended it. He could have had Donbass with the Minsk Accords without any war. And now he's saying we don't want to give away Donbass, even though he could have had it with the Minsk Accords, and then he could have had it with Istanbul. He didn't do anything of that. He continued this war. Now, like Ukraine lost, not Ukraine, but the Kyiv regime lost, together with its allies in the West. America should just leave Ukraine, and as soon as America leaves Ukraine, Zelensky's going to fall. Yeah, there's going to be maybe somebody neutral coming in, but that's the consequences of when you use a country. People are not going to like you after that. People understand that the West was involved in using Ukraine. People are not going to like you after. That's the reality. You're not change it. But if you push it more and more, people are going to hate you more. Right now,
Right.
people in Ukraine start hating the West and more because they said, "Oh, you're going to support Ukraine till the end." They understood that was a promise, and now they're saying, "Oh, where's the support? You're throwing us under the bus, and nothing's happening." Even though the West, there was no interest of supporting Ukraine, bring Ukraine to NATO or Europe. It was just using
They just
Ukraine to
use it
destroy
to
Russia from within.
agitate Russia. Right.
What they wanted is why Trump is going for Greenland and all these territories that need some resources because the deep state under Obama, Biden, made a calculation that they can win Russia by having Ukraine fight a war and have two Slavic countries spill blood between each other, and then have a coup in Russia against the government, and then they're going to have some Navalny or some other opposition leader who has no support from the people come into power, supported by the West, and he's going to say Russia's too big, and we're going to divide it into 3 or 4 pieces and give it away to the people of the world, and then America corporations going to come in and have the 73 trillion dollars worth of resources, minerals, gas, and diamonds, and everything else.
You just
Bring it
basically
up
steal
and
it.
yeah, steal it, and that's what they thought they're going to use it. So that's why America needs those resources right now, and without them, That's why Trump is fighting for them really fast, because they need to do that, and because they miscalculated, they lost this war, and
Well,
everybody's
let me
is pissed about it.
let me ask you one final question that I think is going to be certainly on American viewers' minds, because I don't disagree with you. It looks like these things are happening. So, as someone who was there at the start of it and has witnessed essentially the destruction of his own country, do you think there's anything that could be done to stop that from happening in the United States?
Stop from destroying the United States from within. I think you have to have start forming uh, official government groups, or within the FBI and within the Senate, within the White House, for government officials from different levels who the president trusts, and they have to investigate what is really happening on the ground. Because otherwise, if you trust the system itself, like the Department of Justice or just the FBI, you don't know who's going to work on that file. I don't know. The United States has a problem. The people who, most of the people, uh, are maybe loyal to the country, but there's the 20% or 25% working within the system that have the mid-level possibility within the government bureaucracy to undermine anything that's going to happen from the top to bottom. They're going to try to block it, or even any investigation, official investigation by just the FBI, what's happening within ICE, or why the people are protesting. Nobody's going to know what happened, or the truth, because they're going to be blocked and undermined by those deep state bureaucrats who are loyal to Obama, loyal to uh, Biden, to Newland, to the corporations who brought them there. Look at Peter Strzok and all these people. Look at Brennan. Look at the people who've had to work for their country. They worked against the country, knowing they worked against it. So this is a great example. And there's that 25% is still there. It didn't go anywhere. So form what I would form advisory groups within the government at different levels, from the people you trust. Collect evidence and information and data on different levels of people who knows what these protesters are and how the CIA played abroad.
But
And
isn't that
then
kind of happening in an open source kind of way? We see Nick Shirley going to Minnesota. There's a guy here in New York who's been doing a lot of research into, but they don't do anything to them.
look, you have to have it organized, delivered directly to the ear of the president of the United States, so he would make a decision on what to do next. You have people scattered around doing different work. Get them together. Have independent journalists work in those organizations, in those groups, government groups within the Senate, within the White House, within the FBI. Have people who are ready to give their advice. Have government officials be there, senators and congressmen who know what they're talking about, who are loyal to the cause of today's America. Work on this and advise the president. Don't trust Lindsey Graham. Don't trust people who are neocons within this, because they're going to go after you. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and all these people, they cannot know everything. I know how the system works. You come into the government. I was advisor to the first deputy prime minister overseeing law enforcement and intel groups. When the civil war in Donbass started, we did not know 80% of what's happening on the ground. We were never informed, even though we had to. The government had to inform the people underneath, the security service of Ukraine, the military. They'll not even come to the gatherings or the of the government and the meetings, conferences, government conferences, and they would never even come to us and report to us. They'll give us blank papers or some information, everything's okay, and then we would find out that they killed 10 people with an airstrike, and they said, "Oh, it was the Russians who did it." They disinformed us overseeing them within the government that they had to report to, that it was not them, but it was the Russians. So it's working the same thing in America. Every
It's
government
true.
is this. America
Well,
is broken.
and the other, you're right, it is broken. And the thing that I'm worried about is what you're saying is correct. But meanwhile, Trump and Kash Patel are more worried about somebody kidnapping Savannah Guthrie's mother than they are the absolute destruction of the United States. Andrii, I got to say, it's amazing to listen to your insights and hear, what you've seen firsthand. I wish there was something I could do to help you directly these sanctions are a terrible thing. You are looking well, and I hope that people will follow you on X at Telizhenko Andy. They can communicate with you on there and, kind of keep up with what you're posting. Anything you want to say before we wrap up for tonight?
I thank you for your support. And again, I want to mention our friend Lee Stranahan. Go to his X page and reach out to his brother and his son. They're the ones who are communicating for him on that. Any help they need, and from my end, I can only pray for Lee. And that's what I want to say. Also, is we have to understand it's not just about the United States today. It's about everything that's going to happen. If they break what's left of America, you're going to see the situation going back to chaos more and more. What happened under Biden, Obama? They're going to control the narrative, control the media. Now, at least we're seeing Washington Post is dissolving. Hopefully, they will be destroyed forever because so much lies, and maybe other media will go down. Things are starting to change step by step, but they are. And I do hope that things will change for the best. I'm here. Hopefully, sanctions. Somebody will hear me, and something will happen to my sanctions, and I will be able to see my friend Lee, and we can go and see him and shake his hand because I do admire what he did for me, and he brought us, you and me together, introduced us. So I know you virtually. Hope to. I will also see you one day and shake your hand, and we should pray and think harder of not what's happening in the world, not just what we're reading in the news. I don't read the news at all. As we start reading the news, it's so much chaos. I read between the lines and
Yeah,
watch
they're
what's happening.
lying.
That's what I advise people. Read between the lines. That's where the truth is. You don't always
Well
get it at the
said.
first, but then from time to time you'll understand that you were
It's
right.
well said. I like that, Andrei. You're right. People do need to do that. The news is lying to us all the time. I want to thank everybody who sponsors Crowdsource the Truth on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com, and also everybody who's following me on X at JG_CSTT. Andrii Telizhenko, it's great to see you again, and thank you for all of that. Have a great night. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you, guys.